Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
A country in free fall. Inflation out of control. Protests over plunging currency. These are just 3 headlines within the last 24 hours or so, not about Israel, not about the United States, but about Lebanon. Lebanon, which was known as the Paris of the Middle East. If Lebanon collapses, what could happen next? Hi, everybody. You're listening to the Tamar, Yonah show here at Israel News Talk Radio.com. And we're going to be talking about the future of the Middle East and how that will affect places like Israel, and also what the United States has to do with it. Let me just read you a few more things here again. These are the complete headlines I just read out, leaving out Lebanon. But a country in free fall. What future for Lebanon? Inflation is out of control in Lebanon. Protests in Lebanon over plunging currency. And Al Jazeera writes, once the envy of the Arab world, Lebanon has become a basket case with no end in sight. Its political system is in deadlock, and its economy perishes with each passing day, forcing its leaders to plead for foreign emergency assistance to stay afloat, including food for its starving army. Now, let me just say here that we know that Syria is also being, I'm sorry, let me put it this way. Syria used to basically control Lebanon. It still has a lot of power there, but they've got the Hezbollah in Lebanon now as well. And Hezbollah has been controlling a lot in the Lebanese government. But who controls Hezbollah? And who does Hezbollah get money from? And a lot of the money that Hezbollah gets is from Iran. Iran, the country that says not only death to Israel, it says death to America. So we're going to be hearing more about this when we get back. Don't go anywhere. We have a lot to learn in the show today, and you're not going to see this in too many places on the internet, or at least on podcasts. We'll be right back.
The return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel was prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago and is coming true today. Shalom. Join me, Josh Wander, on Israel Unplugged. Listen in as we delve into the spiritual and physical aspects of the Jewish return to Zion. We'll discuss the biblically mandated, historic, and of course practical understandings of this incredible transition from exile to redemption. That's Israel Unplugged, every Monday on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
We are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And as I read out before, some of the worrying headlines of, and these headlines are just in the last 24 hours on Monday. A country in free fall. What future for Lebanon? Inflation is out of control in Lebanon. Protests in Lebanon over plunging currency. And now also we find out that Jordan is now an ally of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Remember, Iran, who calls for the death of Israel, always with it calls for death to America. So what does all of this mean? And why is it now that we read headlines that King Abdullah, who is the king of Jordan, will be the first Arab leader invited to the White House to meet with U.S. President Joe Biden, even before America's great ally, Israel. What does that mean? So here to tell us more about all of this, we have joining us Dr. Mordechai Kedar. He is a lecturer at Bar-Ilan University. He was lieutenant colonel in the Israel Defense Forces military intelligence. He's an authority on Islamic Islamic movements, gender issues in Islam, the Arabic mass media, and politics and culture in Arab societies. He is frequently interviewed on Israeli television news shows, including other shows in the Arab world, and today he's also vice president of Newsreel. We'll find out more about that, but you can visit his website at www.mordechai.kedar. So welcome to the show, Dr. Mordechai Kedar.
Tamar, thank you so much for having me here.
I am delighted because you are the go-to man when it comes to developments in the Middle East. And seeing these headlines in just the last 24 hours about Lebanon's economy collapsing, I believe that their prime minister also resigned just several days ago. They don't have a good functioning government. What can you tell us?
Well, Lebanon today actually is a dysfunctional country because the main elite, which Lebanon was created for, means the Christians, do not want to act with each other, don't want to sit with each other, don't agree on anything. And with the death of the Christian communities in Lebanon, the whole country lost its raison d'etre. And because of this, they resorted to the Hezbollah, to the Muslims, to the Islamists, and now the Islamists took over. Many Christians are fleeing away from Lebanon because they don't want to stay in such a country, which becomes another Ayatollah country under the Iranian hegemony. So this is in very short what the tragedy of Lebanon. Look, Hezbollah actually controls Lebanon for many years already. Presidents, prime ministers could not be nominated unless Hezbollah gave its consent to their nomination. Hezbollah actually caused the big blast last year in the harbor of Beirut because Hezbollah couldn't care less about the harbor and the people in there, not to mention the people in Beirut. So he turned the harbor into a big storage of explosives. Who cares? So this is actually a dysfunctioning country because the elite, which was the founder of the country, actually lost its will to maintain this country and ran away. So here we are. This is Lebanon, unfortunately. What I'm afraid is that Jordan is walking on the same path because as you know, Jordan for many years was an ally to the United States, to Britain, of course, because the king actually spent many years in Britain. And Jordan was created by Britain after the mandate was finished. And for several years, the Jordanian army was under the commandment of a British general named Glab. In Arabic, they called him Glab Pasha. So definitely, Jordan was created by Britain as a Western country. However, during the last, let's say, half a year, the equations of the Middle East are changing because Iran, under Trump, was chased, was marginalized, was under sanctions, almost collapsed. So everybody was with the Israeli, Saudi, Emirati, Bahraini axis, which was the axis which was empowered by Trump. And Iran was a pariah state. However, since Biden and his administration came to the White House, they changed the whole thing. Today, Iran is the pampered baby of the Middle East by America. while Israel and Saudi Arabia and their allies, like the Emirates, could be pushed under the bus of the American administration. And so Jordan, when Jordan looks around, say, who is in the rise and who is in decline? So no doubt they go to the Iranian side of the equation, because the Iranian side of the equation is now empowered by the United States of America. So, the logic is, if you cannot beat them, join them.
Right.
So since he cannot beat Iran, and Iran can definitely undermine the situation in Jordan, as it did in the neighboring countries, means Iraq and Syria. So the king says, why should I fight Iran after Iran succeeded to occupy or to spread its hegemony over Iraq and Syria and Lebanon as well? Why fight them? Let's join them. So here you are.
So let me ask you this question. Number one, Iran is a sworn enemy against the United States, against the West. They're constantly burning. When they burn the Israeli flag and say death to Israel, they're also screaming right after that death to America and burning the American flag. And so it would seem to me that anybody in the American government who would be helping Iran would be, dare I say it, a traitor. And the second question I have to you is, Jordan, if they are now cozying up to Iran and they make this, deal now of cooperation, Jordan is on Israel's eastern border, and it's a long border. What does that mean to Israel?
Well, these are very, very important questions. Your first question about America, how America dares to empower Iran, its vile enemy. Well, this question has to be directed to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. This is the address of the White House. I can give you the phone number as well. You can call them and ask them this question, because I'm not in a position to answer the question. I'm very, surprised to see how America actually is running into the bosom of the Iranians after Iran was proven to devastate the Middle East. Look, how many hundreds of thousands of people got killed in the Middle East through the last 40 years since the mullahs came to power, let alone the Iranians, which they were killing en masse, especially the new president, who was in charge of the mass killing of the people who were cooperating with the previous regime in Iran. And, America pushed Saudi Arabia under the bus because of what happened with Khashoggi. But they are in bed with the Iranians after they did the same thing to who knows how many thousands of Khashoggis or Iranians. And this is okay. One Khashoggi, and look, I'm not saying that what happened to Khashoggi, what was done to Khashoggi is the right thing to do. I'll never say it. But what the criteria of the American administration of today is very strange. How come they are so angry, the Saudis, while they try to get any way to reconcile with the Iranians and to give them more money? And they know exactly what will happen with this money. This one will be poured on more terror, more weapons, more ammunition, more explosive, in order to continue to burn the Middle East, whether it is in Israel or in Lebanon or in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, or other places as well, and now Jordan. So, but really, I definitely cannot understand the American administration. What do they really think, that if they give the Iranians all these gifts, the Iranians will start behaving in a good way to their neighbors and to the Israelis and to the Arabs and to the Saudis and to the others? Forget it. Mm-hmm. They will be much more emboldened, feel much more secure, that nobody now will dare to touch them, especially Israel, after the stupid Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yair Lapid, promised to the Americans that he will not surprise them, Israel will not surprise the Americans. Means Israel will not take any action without American consent, which will never be given to Israel, to attack Iran. So this is the situation. Today, now, Israel's hands are handcuffed by its own ministers, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I'm afraid that the Prime Minister, Bennett, didn't even know about this commitment of Lapid to the Americans. I highly doubt if he knew about this, because Bennett has some brains, and I'm not sure that he would allow such a thing, but Lapid is actually controls the government along with the Islamic movement. So Bennett hasn't got much to say about what happens in the government or not.
Okay, so hold it right there. We have to take a short break. When we get back, we're going to be talking more about this and what it has to do, how it can affect America, the West, and, of course, Israel. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back.
Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Siminto from Jerusalem, inviting you to drop everything and join me on my show, Pull Up a Chair. We'll visit this week's quirky stories, meet fabulous guests, and discover my Israel. Together, we'll laugh, shout, and explain the topics that make us say, hey, we've got to talk about that. So get comfortable and pull up a chair with me, Andrea Siminto, every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And our guest is Dr. Mordechai Kedar. You can visit his website, mordechaikedar.net. And we're talking about interesting and shocking, I think, developments that are happening here in the Middle East now that are neighbors, bordering neighbors with Israel. On Israel's northern border, we have Lebanon, which is, as the media are headlining it, a country in free fall. They don't even know what the future of Lebanon's going to be. Inflation out of control, protests in the street. Their prime minister is resigned. This is worrying things. And at the same time, on Israel's eastern border, we have Jordan. And headlines now are saying that Jordan is now an ally of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran, which calls for death to Israel and death to America. So what does that mean? So Dr. Mordechai Kedar, with Jordan on Israel's eastern border, and after Jordan, you've got to the east, you've got Iraq, and after Iraq, you've got Iran. It's almost as if since Iran has a lot of power now in Iraq, and now it's extended its reach to Jordan, it's basically Iran on Israel's border. Would you say that?
We are approaching this point. But first of all, I won't be surprised if the one who actually encouraged the Jordanian king to get closer to the Iranians is no other than Joe Biden or his administration. Because as you know, the American administration definitely is in bed today with the Iranians. So if they can broaden the Iranian space of influence, why not adding Jordan to this influence of the Iranians? I won't be surprised if this was an American initiative. This is the first thing. Second thing, don't forget that the king Abdullah of Jordan, his throne is rather fragile. We heard what happened like a month ago when his half-brother, the Crown Prince Hamza, maybe tried to do some coup d'etat against the king, and some other things. Just the aide of Hamza, a guy named Abdullah, was imprisoned a few days ago to 15 years because of this scheme, which was maybe concocted against the king. So definitely he has some problems, the king in Jordan. So he would not like the Iranians to be against him, because Iran so far succeeded to topple or to take over all the countries to the east and to the north from Jordan. I mean Iraq, I mean Syria, I mean Lebanon. Means that Iranians definitely have a way how to get to Jordan as well, infiltrating by buying people, by all kinds of ways of insurgency, maybe sending terrorists and undermine the fragile economy of Jordan, which is anyway in problems because of the million refugees which they host from Syria, another group of refugees which they still host from Iraq. And this is a very, very, very heavy burden on the Jordanian economy. Just imagine that what I think happened, I don't have any evidence for this, but what I think happened that the King Abdullah of Jordan went to the Americans who sent a message to Biden, I need some money, as a loan, as a gift, whatever. So Biden told him, okay, I'll give you, but please, I want to see you have your relations better with the Iranians. So this might be the way how it got. A normal king will not accept the Iranians, and he knows what the Iranians are. Very well he knows. But probably he didn't have any other choice but to accept the Iranians willing to spread their hegemony also on Jordan. So happened what happened.
Okay, I need to ask you this question if I can. What would motivate President Biden to do such a thing? Because I remember back in the 70s when Jimmy Carter was the president and the Shah was in power before the mullahs got in, and the Shah of Iran was Western friendly. The people dressed in Western clothing, the music, they had Western music there, and there wasn't this hatred. And then Jimmy Carter did not support the Shah. In fact, he kicked him out of the United States when the Shah ran there for cover.
Asylum.
And for asylum, right? That's your English is better than mine. And then when we saw later on the People's Revolution, I think that was in the early 2000s. America did not help the people trying to overthrow their mullahs who hate the West. So try to explain that to all of us.
Well, Carter did not allow the Shah to shoot into the demonstrations because he cared for human rights. And you don't shoot into demonstrations because these people want freedom, want rights. So why should you, the Shah, shoot into the demonstrations? And as a result, the mullahs came and took over Iran and kicked out the Shah because he couldn't crash the demonstrations. Okay, so because of Jimmy Carter's good heart, the world has to deal with people who are way, way much more vicious and cruel compared to the Shah, and I mean the mullahs. So okay, this is the fact that this is the result of the fact that Jimmy Carter had no clue about the Middle East, didn't understand anything about the Middle East. He thought from his point of view of wherever he lived, and this is why you make mistakes. He made mistakes in the Middle East. Then came the others with many investments in Iran. And I think that today the Europeans are invested in Iran big, big, big money. Hundreds of billions of dollars in the oil industry, in the gas industry, in the petrochemical industry, and many other industries in Iran. And the Europeans do not want to lose the money, because they are afraid that if the regime will change and the mullahs will be kicked out by the people, nobody will care about their investments, and the next regime will take over whatever they invested and will nationalize it. By the way, it happened already in Iraq, because the same Europeans invested with another vicious mass killer, Saddam Hussein, like $30 billion. And after he was kicked out by the Americans, in 2003, the government which came in Iraq told the Europeans, you go to Saddam Hussein to get your money back. We don't know about this. We never heard about this money. This money never came to us. This money was stolen by by Saddam Hussein. So you find Saddam Hussein in his cave or in his ditch wherever he hides and take the money from him. Of course, Saddam Hussein didn't have a penny on him when he was found. So the Europeans lost all their investments in Iraq of Saddam Hussein. Now, if the Mullah regime is collapsing in Iran, they will again lose many billions of investments, which the next regime in Iran might not honor. So here we are. Money makes the world go around. You remember Liza Minnelli and Joel Grey?
Yeah.
This is exactly what.
But don't they also have investments in Saudi Arabia, which is a so-called ally of the United States? Saudi
Arabia is much more an American place for investment. You know, the main company in Saudi Arabia is Aramco. Aramco is Arab American company. So the Europeans, compared to what happened in Iran, the Europeans are much less invested in Saudi Arabia.
Very, very interesting. Okay, and so again, I need to ask you this again. So with what we're seeing, that Iran hates America, they call death to America, and yet Biden, you're saying, maybe encouraging Jordan to ally with Iran. And so what does America get out of it? You're saying that the Europeans have heavy investments there. America has heavy investments in Saudi Arabia, which Iran hates and wants to take control of if they could as well. So how does that add up?
Look, what runs America today is a Democratic Party. Democratic Party, I believe, they don't care so much about the businesses, the big businesses. These big businesses in the States are much more connected to the Republican Party. Add to this the squad in the Democratic Party, which hates Saudi Arabia, because they all side with the Muslim Brotherhood, which hates Saudi Arabia as well. And this is actually, since the Muslim Brotherhood today is in alignment with Iran, and we see how Iran is helping Hamas, which is a wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. So Saudi Arabia, which is considered the enemy of both the Muslim Brotherhood and Iran, is pushed under the bus by the American administration because they side with the Muslim Brotherhood in America and abroad. And this is actually what explains what motivates the American administration. And don't forget that for them to promote the cause of America, like America First, which was the slogan of Trump, or Make America Great Again, they are not there. For them, America, they view America as a colonialist country.
Okay, hold it right there. We have to go to another break. We're going to be right back.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Hello, I am Walter Bingham. If you want to hear the news behind the news and the true perspective on world affairs, then the Walter Bingham File is the program for you. We bring you interviews with the movers and shakers, political commentaries, and on-the-spot reports of events as they happen. All here every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Israel time, 9 a.m. Eastern time. And it's all archived on our website. Make it a date.
All right, we are back here at the Tamar Yonah Show on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and we're talking about the new developments in the Middle East, which are quite concerning, and that is the instability of Israel's northern neighbor, Lebanon, with its inflation out of control, its country in free fall. Those are not my words. Those are the words of I believe it's Al Jazeera article, and these are just in the last 24 hours that I'm giving you these news articles. And now Jordan has become an ally of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, Islamic republics are not usually that friendly or admire the West, which they look at as decadent and as an enemy. So what does all of this mean for Israel? What does all of this mean for the United States? And our guest is Dr. Mordechai Kedar from www.mordechaikedar.net, N-E-T, at the end. And I wanted to ask you in this segment, Dr. Kedar, with a possible collapse of Lebanon, and with the Hezbollah still having some power there, and they're backed by Iran, do you think that there could be some, a possible future attack or war on Israel's northern border from Lebanon into Israel, and including the Hamas, which also gets money from Iran on Israel's southwestern border? What do you see that would actually affect us here?
Well, the future scenarios between Israel and Lebanon are totally connected to the future scenarios between Israel and Iran. Lebanon is not free, and Hezbollah is not free to act by its own interests or whatever. They are directed closely by Iran, and Iran will not allow them to go on a private venture like a war against Israel if it doesn't fit the Iranian timetable or interests. So the question is, what should happen between Israel and Iran to make possible a war between Israel and Lebanon? This is how we should phrase the question. And here I really don't know, because what happens between Israel and Iran is very, very dramatically connected to what happens between Israel and the United States of America, especially after Yair Lapid, the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs, committed Israel not to surprise the Americans. Means that on every step which Israel wants to take against the Iranians, Israel should get the American consent in advance, a consent which will never be given, in my humble view. Mm-hmm. Because today America wants to appease the Iranians and to make them feel better. So this is why the relations between Israel and Lebanon is part of a much broader equation, which includes also components like Iran and the United States.
And I'm still at a loss, again, if you could just maybe in one sentence explain it to like a third grader, why America would want to see a stronger Iran, which hates America.
Because apparently the American administration now thinks that if you give a bully a good attitude, he will become nice man. This is called the policy of appeasement. But the problem is that appeasement never works with dictators, because the more they are appeased, the more their appetite grows bigger.
Right. So
this is why I think every commentator who understands something in the Middle East knows for sure that the American administration actually is walking into the abyss with the Iranians, because it cannot succeed. The Iranians will be much more emboldened, and with the money they will be much more with abilities to devastate more Arab countries like Jordan. What do you think? The Iranians come in order to maintain the kingdom there? They come in order to take the country over. And apparently maybe this is why Israel tries to save the king by giving him more water, as recently Bennett promised the king. and maybe other things which are supposed to convince the king not to fall altogether into the bosom of the Iranians, but to stay with one foot out in order to save his neck from the Iranians' hegemony.
Well, that certainly didn't work now, did it?
I have no idea, because many things are being done behind the scenes, which we, the citizens, and the media as well, are not exposed to. So I really don't know what happens between Bennett and the king. And this is, unfortunately, in the Middle East, when America tries to reshape the Middle East without any knowledge about the Middle East, without understanding the Middle East. And when I see what the mistakes which are being done by the administration since Biden came into the White House, I cannot escape the conclusion that these people are clueless about the Middle East. They have absolutely no idea what to do here. All kinds of initiatives which cannot work. They try to promote these initiatives. And unfortunately, the Middle East is being manipulated by an administration which is very powerful, yet understands very little.
All right. So talking about the media and about not understanding things here, how, the Arab mentality and not understanding the Middle East and its importance and et cetera, et cetera. You have come up now. I understand you're the vice president of something called Newsreel. It's an application for both Android and iPhones, I understand.
Yes,
and if people want to find it, Dr. Kedar tells me that it's a blue icon with a white Star of David in it, and it's called, again, Newsreel. And so tell us about that, because this is the first time I'm hearing about it,
It's
too.
a combination of the words news and Israel.
So spell it out for our listeners.
They can go to the App Store and download it for free.
Right, but spell it News.
Newsrael.
Okay, Newsrael. Okay, go ahead.
And they can read like 100 items daily. It's the biggest news feed about Israel and the Middle East, about security, about economy, about archaeology, about religion, about all kinds of things connected to Israel and the Middle East. And everything is free. And we are not subject to censorship by Facebook or by Twitter or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, because this is an independent application which everybody can download for himself and surf and look at what we publish every day. Very interesting materials, very easy to operate it. It reminds you of Facebook, but it's not a Facebook. It's something which is private. We developed it, and whoever wants to invest in it, it's very, very easy to get in touch with us or get in touch with you, and you can give me his name, phone number.
Right, I'll send you anything. So is this only for news articles, or is it also for videos to share, etc.?
It's news combined with JPEGs, with photos, with diagrams, with videos, with many other things about Iran, about the Middle East, about Israel. Very interesting application, which is totally free, 24/7. And I highly encourage everybody to download it from his App Store. It's both for Android and iPhone. And look at the information which we disseminate all over the world.
And does it work like Facebook, where you can leave comments and your reactions?
You can leave comments. You can cooperate. You can communicate with us. It's just like a website, but it is by a cell phone. And since today people are much more using the cell phone much more than they use television, so we took this whole thing to the application, and please feel free to download it and to install it and to surf in this application and just read about what we have to say about Israel and the Middle East.
This is very good, and very good to give to relatives. They just came out with a survey that I think up to a quarter of the Jews in the United States believe because that's what they're being, bombarded with all the time, the media, that Israel is an apartheid state. So this would be something very, very good.
Well, you will not read such a thing in Israel. We are a pro-Israel news feed.
And accurate.
We are accurate, of course. And most of our contents are contributed by content contributors who allow us to use their material. And this is the application which gives you the 24/7 free or totally free information about Israel and the Middle East. Just download it and learn and know much more about Israel and the Middle East.
Right. And I'm just looking at a screenshot of it because I just want to tell all of our listeners, I just learned about this now together with you. And I just looked it up on the computer while Dr. Kedar was talking. And I see here, again, it's a blue square with a white Magen David or Jewish star or Star of David in the middle of it. And there's people who are commenting and they have their names there. So if you want to get your name on there before someone else grabs your name, you should go there and do that. I'm going to do it after the show as well. Dr. Mordechai Kedar, God bless you. Thank you so much for explaining what's going on here because this is very disturbing news. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Tamar, thank you so much for giving me the pulpit.
All right, everybody. And if you have any comments or questions, feel free to write me at Tamar, Tamar, at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Thanks for being with us.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
If you're hearing this message, everyone else can too. Advertise with Israel News Talk Radio and get your message out to people. We'll build a personalized package for you. Contact advertising at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey, this is Jake in Anchorage, Alaska, and I love listening to all the super interesting interviews and up-to-date information on what's happening in Israel.
Hello, this is Anna King, originally from London, now living in Israel. And what can I say? Israel News Talk Radio is my cup of tea.
My name is Bhaskar. I'm from India, and I love listening because you get to know the truth and wonderful voices from this lovely country.
Mom! Okay, wait a minute. Hi, this is Chava Dax, and I'm calling for the rolling hills of Ma'ale Adumim, just north of Jerusalem. I always listen to Israel News Talk Radio to get all the latest news and commentary and to keep me up to date every day.
This is Sarah Dax from Ma'ale Adumim, and I'm 12. I wish Israel News Talk Radio was boring so my mom wouldn't listen to it all the time. Mom!
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.